Hello. So what I'm going to do here is just go through the settings that I've been using to get successful prints. I've had somebody, at least one person, wanted to see, and hopefully this helps somebody, anybody. I am using the latest release of ChiTuBox 1.5.0. 1.3 and 1.4 apparently had some bugs that got worked out, which is great. 1.5, so far I haven't had any apparent issues with it. It certainly crashes far less often than 1.4 did. So what I'm going to do here is just bring in a file. You can see I'm using a Mac, but I'm sure the application itself works just as well on Windows. I can't really speak to that, so anybody else want to chime in, go for it. So I need one of these angels printed out. I need this solar, I believe. It's drag and drop on Mac. Fairly certain it's the same on Windows. And drag and drop stuff in. Obviously we can see this is a bit too large for our build plate. It's my first time seeing this. This is pretty cool. I like this one. So we can just scale to fit the size. The sword here is still off the edge, which is fine. We'll just go ahead and see if we can fit that somehow. So to rotate and move, we're going to use this. None of these things are labeled in the app, by the way. You just kind of have to look at the symbol and guess what it is. This is location on the build plate. So, oh, centered. Look at that. It fits now. And then I'm going to rotate it around. It's usually recommended something like this you do at about a 45, something like that. And then let's see if this will auto center again. Apparently that is centered. So click and drag to move it over. Make sure nothing is outside of this blue line or touching the blue line. This here, this little eye over here gives you the full overhead view so you can see exactly where things are and where they'll be on the build plate. I am concerned about the sword. I do have another file, or another handful of files that is multiple parts of this, but I'm just going to do this single file. One file, one print for now. I'm going to go over to our supports. This is basically all a bunch of defaults, with the exception of density that I turned up to 70. So it's density is the percentage of the model that is basically face down, or as it's printing it would be face up on the build plate. The percentage that is going to be automatically hit with supports. We're using, this auto support feature. So if I just hit that, 70% of the model gets supported. And you can see it's a lot of supports. Oh, look at that. Goes off the edge a little bit. So what you can do is just come back over here, drag it over a little bit, and there's a little bit of support skate can be off the edge. That doesn't need to print, that's fine. That'll just be on the edge. It'll come right up to the edge of the build plate, and that's totally okay. The model itself is all supported up, and if the thing prints properly, many of these supports wouldn't really be necessary, but I've found that things that aren't supported like this, like the layer that would be right about here, would just fall off onto the FEP film and not stick to the build plate, and then when the build plate comes back down, it sets on that layer again, gets exposed again, and then it pulls that layer off, which leaves sort of, rather than having two layers lining up like this, one layer will be off to the side, or there will be kind of a gap because it moved, or it doesn't have, it's not the exact shape layered right on top of itself to make that connection. It's kind of off-centered because it's missing, it's basically missing a whole layer in between. And that sucks when that happens, because it can ruin a whole print. But anyway, we're just going to use the automatic heavy supports. I turned up the density, but that's about it. And then we go back over into our little settings panel here. Again, has no kind of label or description on it. Go over to settings. And the settings that I've used are from our friendly Facebook group. Somebody printed or jotted down all of these settings right here, and it's a Google Drive file, so you can copy it into your own Google Drive if you have Google Drive, and make changes as you need to. But I've just left it here as the base settings that other people have recommended and had successful prints on. And in the beginning, yes, I had successful prints with this resin using these settings right here. Since, though, I have had to tweak the settings to get successful prints again. For some reason, it just stopped printing successfully. I got a lot of failed prints with basically the skate, the first few layers, just sticking right to the bottom of the FEP film. Didn't stick to the build plate. So I have turned up the bottom exposure time, turned it back down. Now I've turned up the bottom lift speed. That I believe is allowing the print to pull off the FEP film more reliably. It pulls off a little bit faster than what this recommended speed is. Bottom lift speed 25 here. I turned that up. It works fine now. Turned up the exposure time and the bottom layer count. So the bottom layer count, I turned it back down to exposure time of 100, and I'm getting prints that are sticking to the print bed at least. And then I turned up the layer exposure time, which is for every other layer of the print, and I'm getting very successful prints there. Of course, with your different layer heights, you're going to have different exposure times. So 0.05 exposure or layer height, it recommends, or the recommendation here is 6 seconds. And then I turned that up to 10 seconds. And that's just how I'm getting successful prints. It may be different for everybody. I'm not a scientist, I'm just a hobbyist. I don't mess with the infill. I don't need it for these little models that I'm doing. Maybe someday I'll need to do that, and I'll just make a video just on that. The light, this is just the power of the light that's being projected at the bottom of the printer. Your resin density would be something you'd have to look up from the manufacturer. This is just the default. Resin cost, I did increase this. Not that it matters. All the resin cost does is it estimates the actual cost for your print. Your machine, these are the specs for your machine. This is what the machine uses to actually make its prints at what resolution, which is 1080p, and the actual print size available to the machine. No need to change any of that stuff if you're using the SparkmakerFHD. So we can close that. Got all the settings I want, and then we hit slice. Alright, so after slicing, we get this information here, which is, this is probably an approximation. I don't think it can be exact unless you have the exact density and right type of resin input and the exact price per liter of your resin. Should be about 42 cents American, and the print itself should take about 11 hours and 1 minute. Now, looking at the print time, there's very little way I'm going to get this print any faster. Using the settings that I have, it calculates that print time based on how many layers and how long that layer needs to expose. So my little bit longer exposure time, that's an extra 2 seconds for every layer. I think, what is this? Is this a layer counter on the bar here? Again, this is, okay, so we're looking at probably 1,300 layers. I think that's what that is, but I'm not entirely sure. I haven't read all of the details on this app and how it works, and honestly, I don't really care. As long as it works, right? So in any case, we can take this slider and we can see each layer as it would be exposed. It's usually a good idea to take a look at this. You mouse over this here, hit the play button, and this plays what it will expose. This is basically displaying what the LCD is allowing light to pass through. So we can see here it's working on the supports, and it goes on and on and on. And it goes layer by layer, showing us exactly what it's going to expose. Just make sure that all of the pieces that you need exposed are there, and that's it. So then we are going to take our SD card. I have taken just a little piece of white tape. You could use a thin sellotape, like regular packing tape, clear tape. A little bit thinner would probably be better. This tape in particular is kind of thick, but it's over the lock mechanism on an SD card, and I just cover that up so that it can't be mistaken as locked. The card reader just sees that the whole thing is covered up. It can't be locked. So I'm going to slide this into my SD card reader on my computer, hit save. The print must be saved as print.fhd. I'm going to save it right onto my SD card here, which of course will want to overwrite this file that's already there. And I will replace that file, and then it starts writing the file. It'll write the file directly to my SD card. Of course, you could just put it in another folder on your computer if you like. If you need to save something for later, just remember that you'll always have to relabel the file print.fhd for the SparkmakerFHD. I think previous models may have used print.wow, W-O-W, but for the SparkmakerFHD, it is print.fhd. Alright, write successfully. I think there's an error in translation, but that just means the write is finished. The file ended up written where it needed to be. I have it on my SD card here now, so I can just eject that. And we'll move over to the printer and get it going. So before anyone asks, yes, this is on a mini fridge, and no, the mini fridge is not on, so it is not vibrating, which would most definitely cause issues in prints. Movement on the printer, or vibration, would definitely cause some off prints. I'm going to slide my SD card in here, get the green light, my build plate is clear, topped off the resin reservoir, and we're going to get this going. While we're looking at this, I know a lot of people are using just straight isopropyl alcohol to rinse their prints. I did that for the first handful of prints. It worked out fine. I then decided I wanted to use some acetone instead. Straight acetone, of course, just wrecks any thin parts. It's way too strong, and it cuts through a lot of thin parts, which will ruin your print. So I did a acetone solution of 50-50 with water, and I'm getting decent results with that. It's definitely not cutting through any thin parts of prints. However, it does, because it's water, and the not getting any movement on my print here. Great. Turns red real quick and does not print. What in the fuck could that be? Alright, I'm going to reset the printer and see if it'll print. Right, eject my SD card there. Let it turn back on. A nice blue light. Green light. And there it goes. So apparently the printer just didn't want to print that file the first time. Give it a good old-fashioned unplug, turn it off, turn it back on again, you know? So in any case, the acetone mixture here is working well, but it does, because it's water and not alcohol, and the resin does not mix with water. It doesn't dissolve in water, it doesn't mix with water at all. It's leaving this residue, which is the leftover resin that just, it doesn't dissolve in the acetone because the acetone's not strong enough in this 50-50 solution. But other than that, it's been working perfectly fine for me. I would definitely go with alcohol because it's easier from here on out. But I bought this giant tin of acetone, which has been awesome for cleaning parts, by the way. Cleaning my tools, cleaning the print bed. It just removes everything off of it. So it's been super great for cleaning things and getting any residue off of the print bed, my tools, but it's just not great for rinsing and cleaning prints. You see I've got some Rain-X here as well. It was recommended previously to me by another printer, another user, I guess, to just use a wipe of that on the FEP film. I have not actually had to do that yet, but it was recommended because all of my prints were sticking to the film rather than sticking to the print bed. So if it comes up again, if it starts doing that again, I might just wipe the FEP film with a little bit of that, and it's supposed to help the print release off of the FEP film rather than sticking to the film, which would then allow it to adhere to the print bed as it rises up. This print just finished. It's about 3:30 in the morning where I am. Looks okay so far. We'll see what it's like when it's all rinsed off and, you know, all the supports are clipped and whatever. Alright, nice and easy off. And let me just give it a good scrape off of here. Then it takes a little bit to get it off under the edges. Usually, get underneath it, give it a little twist and pry, and then just pop right off. Alright, so it poured off into this larger bath here. Just it's a $1 something tray from Home Depot, painting trays, I think. Let that sit for a few minutes, agitate a bit. I'm sure you've heard it 100 times, so if you haven't, you probably should. When you're handling these things, wear gloves. Wear gloves, because this resin is nasty, nasty stuff. So we've done our rinse bath and a water bath. The water bath, of course, gets off any excess alcohol, or in this case, acetone solution. And now we can start removing supports before we cure the model. And this is going to be a long, slow process. A lot of supports on this. Very carefully at the tip of each one, give it a snip. Here we go. We can see the base part of this model is warped, so that would need some extra supports in the next print. And the sword piece here, that is supposed to be straight, so that's going to need some more supports some way or another. And then in clipping off the supports. I managed to break one of the little delicate feathers of a wing. All in all, it's not bad. It's a good sign. This just means I can make some changes and increase some supports here and there, and we'll have a good print. And then in the meantime, I'm just going to set this in the window after it's dry to cure.